This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. This is show 387, Wednesday, November 21st. This is being recorded. Not sure when it'll actually be added to the stream. Peter Thomas Fornatel back with you, far from the Brooklyn bunker, still in San Diego, but I've moved to fancier digs. I've said goodbye to the Mission Valley Hilton Garden Inn, and I'm now at the world-famous Hotel del Coronado, and I owe the folks here a big thank you. They let me get in the room nice and early today to enable me to get the fancy audio equipment, which I now carry with me around the country in a suitcase provided by producer Craig. Got it all set up and running, and that's where I'm sitting talking to you. Beautiful, beautiful place here on Coronado Island in San Diego, and thrilled to be here for our Thanksgiving show. Feeling very grateful. And I'm going to bring in a person who I know is also feeling very grateful these days. He is the people's champion. He is Jonathan Kinchin. What's up, JK?
What's going on? I'm trying to figure out which multi-race race I'm going to go all in on this Hawthorne contest coming up this weekend. So, well, you know, there's the early pick 5 at Churchill appears to be all dirt. This could be the winner, PTF. This could be the winner.
I like it. I assume you probably would have to do more than one sequence. Do you think you could just win the contest in early pick 5 at Churchill? Is that possible?
No, I don't think so. But it's a way to kind of get into position and find out where you want to go next.
Since you brought it up, let's give a plug to our friends at Hawthorne. They do a great job out there with these open board contests. You can play in any pool, at any track, I think any thoroughbred track that they offer. And how does it work in terms of the prize pool and what's on offer, etc.?
Oh, geez, you're right. Yeah, I'm actually going for tour points. I think I let you know, at least definitely, and I think maybe I've let the listeners know, but I have a private goal of trying to accomplish a top 20 tour performance without having to participate online. So this is obviously one of my favorite race tracks to attend and play in contests. They have two different contests. One on Friday is a $300 live bankroll, no entry fee. You can play anything you want, no minimums, no maximums. You can play any racetrack that's running live. I mean, obviously, I'm not sure about like some really of the obscure ones, but anyone you can think of, you can definitely do. And it's and so that's great. They have 2 entries they're going to give away to the NHC on Friday. On Saturday, it's a $500 live bankroll. They're giving away 6 NHC spots, and like I said, there's no entry fee, which is something we've talked about. Obviously, with the World Horse Players Tour, we've given kudos to the Pegasus contest as well. Very horse player friendly, and Tommy Massis will be very happy to know that you can bet anything and everything that you want, which is also a great opportunity.
Tommy, a big believer in that open board for contests. I wonder if he'll be making the trip down from Toronto. I don't think he will if the prize is mostly NHC related. Not as much as you and I love the NHC. We know it's not something that's at the top of Tommy's list. And plus, I believe he's qualified once already anyway. But who knows? Maybe Tommy, the Hammer, will be making an appearance. Always good to get to see him, one of the most entertaining guys in the contest world, and a teddy bear beneath his gruff exterior. I still remember him teaching Perrin how to hustle people at the party in Saratoga with that little handheld horse racing game. One of my favorite memories, heartwarming memories of 2018. One thing we did.
One other thing, real quick, Pete.
Yeah, go ahead.
If we've warned you too late about the November 23rd and 24th edition, then go ahead and pop it on your radar. January 4th and 5th, they also have some opportunities to play at Hawthorne. So you can maybe put that one on your schedule a little further out.
Absolutely. I'm sure who knows, maybe we'll encourage, we have a lot of listeners in that area. Maybe we'll encourage somebody to get down there and participate and then get an opportunity to see them out in Vegas for the NHC. Opportunities for qualifying dwindling for that one. I'll be out there working with Steve Bick again. You'll be out there participating. Going to be a lot of fun and another opportunity to get away from the freezing cold weather in New York. I was very gratified when just speaking to Scott Gramling, managing editor of DRF Sports Forum and our partner in crime on the DRF Sports Forum podcast, when he was telling me how cold it is back in New York. I was asking for all the gory details. I wanted to know the dew point, etc., because it is, of course, just absolutely perfect here in San Diego. I'm not going to be making it out to the track for their Thanksgiving brunch tomorrow. Too much going on here, including, JK, I'm running in a race myself. We're doing there's a 5K on Coronado Island in the morning, and I'll be out there. I don't think it'll be a situation like that great story I told on the pod long ago of that Father's Day 5K in Saratoga that I ran in when it was a benefit for the local fire department, and they all went out the night before and got drunk, and most of the firemen didn't show up, and I ended up finishing third in my age group, which I was pretty impressed with. I don't think I'll be medaling. I got a medal and everything. I don't think I'll be medaling tomorrow, but I am very much looking forward to it.
Funny enough, you were. I had talked to some clockers. You were C+ training into that. I don't know if people have seen you lately, but you look fit. You look real fit. You look like you might be training B minus.
Absolutely, things have improved. For folks who haven't seen me since Saratoga, down close to 40 pounds. This was a doctor's orders thing. I came back from Saratoga and took a blood test at the doctor's, and he basically gave me the speech that the doctor in what was the movie called? JK, help me out here. I want to say Fast Food Nation, but that was not it. The Morgan Spurlock documentary where he only eats at McDonald's. What's that movie called? Super Size Me.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, Super Size Me.
It wasn't indicative of what it was about. The name was Super Size Me.
It was Super Size Me, and my doctor gave me the same speech that I was turning my liver into pate. This was after probably eating conservatively 25 hamburgers
into pate or pat day.
That would be a very different phenomenon. But I took the man seriously. I've been healthy, dietary changes, and back in full running training. And it's true. My recent works have been pretty good. This is not a race I'm really too worried about running for time. Just looking to get out there and feel good. One of my goals, funny enough, relates to the NHC. And that's my buddy Frank Sorensen, who's a runner, leads a group who goes out there every morning during Vegas, and they run whatever they do. They have some 3-mile route they do every morning to get their minds right before competing in the NHC. And last year, I would have been able to I don't even think I could have really done it. I was doing walk running at that point. I couldn't have gone with people who run all the time and done a proper, anything resembling a decent time. That's one of my training goals. This race tomorrow is a step along the way.
I run to Starbucks in the morning and get a warm milkshake. Essentially, you'll be proud, Pete. I have downgraded to 1 pump of the chocolate into the mocha latte situation.
Little victories, JK. We all need those little victories along the way. All the excitement past the Breeders' Cup, we didn't ever really pause to talk about Equestricon, which was very successful, and we had a lot of fun, had an opportunity, and you did a lot of this too, periscoping to make sure that the some of those panels were preserved. We got a lot of positive feedback. I will say this though, I think one of the more entertaining things we ever did, JK, was that little bit with our friend Acacia Courtney. The game that we played, they were for 2 days. Folks associated with this recording were telling us, "Oh, you just wait and see what we have in for you." Have you recovered yet from the DRF or 50 Shades of Grey game?
Yeah, I tell you what, it was a nerve-wracking experience. I was so nervous I was going to say something wrong. I'm a little too dark-skinned to blush, but I definitely got a little rosy.
If you haven't seen that, I don't know where folks can find it now, but it's worth checking out, and it sort of ruined me in that same way that the "that's what she said" trope can sort of destroy your mind. Now I'll just see certain comments in the racing forum and only be able to see them in that context. I don't want to get into too many specifics here for fear that they'll pull the plug on this show and we'll never be able to broadcast again. But if you have an opportunity, and maybe we should go ahead and send it around one more time, I'll do the old, in case you missed it, as discussed on today's podcast, and folks can watch us just squirm in front of the camera for that one. But it was a lot of fun. In all seriousness, though, Equestricon, very successful event once again. Was there anything in particular, aside from what we've talked about already, that you feel like folks should check out or that you learned from participating this time around?
Well, I thought the panel that you and Marshall did talking about computer-assisted wagering was insightful. I mean, a lot of the topics, I've been fortunate enough to have those conversations with Marshall, but I was still picking up a ton from that. I caught the tail end of the bet construction that I know that you were able to do with Dink and obviously Mike Maloney and Ed DeRosa and Papo Morales, and so I thought those were great. I was also able to. I know that you had a prior engagement, or maybe you were upstairs signing books, but I got to watch the wagering Horseman with Joe Applebaum, Jack Wolf, Craig Bernick, and that was hosted by or mediated by Pat Cummings, which was great as well. So I thought it was a lot of fun, man. I think Equestricon does a great job of kind of bringing the fans together and allowing horse players to have some things to discuss and toss around. I thought the topics were really good, and I look forward to hearing what they're going to do next year from a timing standpoint, and then also some of the people they're going to have on.
Hopefully Pat was doing more moderating than mediating, but I suppose in that type of environment it can go either way. And yes, kudos to Dan and Katie and Justin for putting on a great event, and hopefully we'll have some news to share. And I'd love to offer some more consulting. I was very pleased that they allowed me to suggest some panels to put on that I was able to be involved in some cases, or just watch from afar in others. And I think the more that we can bring together the horse player, the fan, the owner, all the different entities in a friendly environment, the better off we are. And I think Equestricon, for me, is a great example of that. I know some folks on the gambling side don't exactly get it, but I would recommend keeping an open mind and checking it out. How do you feel on that score, JK?
For sure. No, for sure. I think that both sides were covered. Everything you're interested in was covered. I know there was a lot of I think there was social media panels and international racing, and I wasn't able because I was cross-entered with, not cross-entered, but I was up. We were running at the same time, like Oaklawn and Gulfstream, with some of the track announcer ones, which I was lucky enough to go to at Saratoga, that are just a ton of fun. Listening to Tom, I can listen to Tom Durkin read the phone book for 3 hours and be happy and giddy like a schoolgirl. So that was one that I regret missing, but a lot of fun. Always a lot of fun. Very, very. They've done a great job. They should be proud of what they've put together, and obviously they'll continue to grow it as much as they can. And it's tough, I think, though. In all honesty, Pete, like finding the perfect time to do it. Saratoga during the week made sense because it feels like people go to Saratoga for a longer period of time. Earlier in the week, a Breeders' Cup made sense. But so many fans come in just for the weekend. They can't really miss the whole week. And so right. I'm not really sure when the perfect time to have it is because obviously they can't go up against racing because that just would be tough. But I think they've done a good job to try to find some sweet spots.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what they've learned from the two that they've done, and hopefully it's something that will happen again. And once again, I'd love to be a part of it. My dream for the next one, though, JK, and maybe we'll work hard to make this happen, live podcast at an event like that with an audience. How fun would it be to do one of these with an audience sometime?
I'd have to put pants on, so I'm not really sure how much fun it would be.
Well, we could play the bingo game, though. I'm telling you, if you put the card under every seat, it could be fantastic. We'll have to fly in Gene just to create some custom bingo cards for us, and we'll have a great time. You've also given me another idea. We've talked a bunch about doing some more interview type shows over the course of the winter for some of the quiet weeks. Next few weeks are going to be pretty busy. Lots of excellent racing coming up, but throughout the dead of the winter, we sometimes have the opportunity to produce some evergreen content. You think Tom Durkin would talk to us if we were really, really nice to him? Think he'd join us here for a show sometime?
I would fanboy hard. Man, I would fanboy very hard in that situation.
Well, it could be very cool. Bunch of races to talk about. Lots of cool stuff happening at Churchill Downs over the weekend. Maybe we will start there. We've got a couple of stakes on Friday, a couple of stakes on Saturday. I always associate this weekend with those big aqueduct stakes, but I guess this is now a couple of years in a row where the Rems and etc. don't happen until the week after Thanksgiving. That'll be particularly interesting this year for me, with Code of Honor making the return to the races in the Remsen. But we don't have that to worry about for this weekend. So I say we go straight to Churchill on Friday, and then we'll look at the Saturday races. And Saturday's pretty cool with the pair. Is it an entire 2-year-old card they're doing on Saturday?
I didn't look at the rest of the card, so I'm not 100% sure.
I think it's something pretty cool, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's start with the race that will go as the 10th, 5:27 p.m. on Friday night, and that's going to be the Grade 2 Mrs. Revere. We got some familiar names in here and some less familiar names in here. Where did you end up, JK?
Well, old Chad threw one on the plane, which is interesting. I don't think Chad's much of a ship into Churchill guy, but I thought the performance of Stella de Camelot last time was super impressive. Eric Hansel was up, the switch to Joel. That was run on soft. I would imagine that the weather hasn't been that it's going to be firm over there since all the rain they had and just the weather that they've had in Kentucky so far this year. I think this horse for Chad's going to be extremely tough. He missed the break a little bit last time, or she did, excuse me. Finish was much the best in the Pebbles, and I just didn't really see anything in here, in my opinion, that I thought they could beat her. I guess Cool Beans and Princess Warrior deserve a look. Cool Beans more than Princess Warrior because she's a little bit more forwardly placed with Florent Giroux, but I just don't feel like she's fast enough to really take advantage of that small little pace advantage that she might have, and I don't see how this horse, second time for Chad, is going to get beat. The ground should be fine, and that's Joel's trip coming from off of it.
It feels like this is a race you might be participating in the double in the Hawthorne contest, and the race that it connects to is the Grade 1 Clark, which came up with a field of 8, with the favorite being 8-5 Seeking the Soul. Is this a double you project to be approaching this weekend, and where do you think you'll go to try to close it out?
Seeking the Soul ran second to one of the best horses in training, and a horse that I can't wait to wager on in the Pegasus and City of Light. It seems a little bit quick. It's not that quick, but he's coming back pretty sharply there. He ran November 3rd, but he's definitely the class of the field. I think Seeking the Soul will be extremely tough. But Leofric is a horse that won at Keeneland in the slot, that has been training well, and I thought that he kind of stamped himself as a horse that we wanted to keep an eye on moving forward in the handicap division. If I were to play some doubles, I think I'd be ice cold with Chad in the first leg, leading into the two horses that we just mentioned with Seeking the Soul and Leofric. Bravazzo definitely ran better than I thought he was going to run. That's for sure in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. But he's the kind of horse that he always shows up. I think sometimes horses can suck along to get better figures than the performance might actually deserve. City of Light gutted anything and anyone that wanted to be forwardly placed in that spot, and I think probably set it up a little bit for Bravazzo.
Prime Attraction, another who will take money in here, coming off just a head loss to Leofric. Is he one that you're going to be looking to use, or one that you're opposed to?
Probably opposed to, but not completely against it. It just the horse ran well enough last time. That performance was in the slot. Obviously, you have to be a little bit. You have to kind of question those figures that take place in the slot. You never really know if it's going to be what it looks like it's going to be. Time for him, I gave him a 124 for that race, which is 10 points higher than when he got the race before that, going a mile and 1/8 in the Awesome Again. But Accelerate obviously franked the form there. He's one to consider. The rail draw is a little bit tricky. I just think Seeking the Soul and Leofric are probably going in the right direction, but he definitely would be the horse I would use third if one of those two weren't to get the job done.
Okay, and do you think realistically, if you're playing a double, that's one that you could include, or do you think you're probably just going to have to lean on the top of the ticket given the chalk that you're going to be using in the prior leg?
Well, based on the conversation we had last week, I think is probably where I think we had a listener ask, what Marshall's, and we can actually kind of transition to talk about that. Marshall texted us both kind of his response, but asked kind of if Marshall's position in the BCBC influenced the play that he made. And this is one of those situations where, depending on what I have and what the leader has, would influence whether or not I would throw in Prime Attraction and what the payoff was going to be, so on and so forth. If I had enough from hitting the early pick 5 and was on the lead, then obviously I would do something a little bit safer, risk half the bankroll, use Prime Attraction, Seeking the Soul, and Leofric. If I'm behind and the leader's at 11,000 and I've got 1,700, then I might make a play that is a little bit more aggressive, not using Prime Attraction, just using Seeking the Soul and Leofric.
I'm glad you mentioned that about Marshall. Do you have his text response handy? We were sort of mid conversation, so there'll be more on this later. But I'm curious to share some of it now with the audience. You have it in front of you by chance?
I do. You did a great job doing that thing where you just talk in circles until I can get ready. Marshall says, I heard the question about my BCBC play on the pod. I like the narrative of me turning my last 720 into 52,000. In truth, I had another entry with a decent amount of powder, and on that ticket I played Wildcat on top, tossing Abel Tasman. So if Wildcat would have won, he probably would have been a little bit more aggressive, but he played it separately. The plan was always to play Gunnevera underneath in the Classic, one of the few opinions I had all weekend. And if I had 40K going into the Classic, I probably would mess it up. He didn't say mess it up. I would probably mess it up and go backwards.
Which is interesting to me, and that's why I asked him a follow-up, basically to see what he was saying he would have done. Maybe he just means he would have gotten much more conservative or covered a lot more possibilities and not ended up with as aggressive a play on Gunnevera underneath. To be continued when we hear back from Marshall on that one. Maybe we should just have him on the darn show to talk about it at this point. But I had another general handicapping question for you, JK, that came up as a result of that conversation. Generally speaking, these Breeders' Cup horses who come back to compete later in the year, obviously it depends on the specifics, but generally speaking, are you inclined to use them? Are you inclined to press them? Are you inclined to fade them thinking they might be over the top?
Over the top is a really hard thing for me to identify. I think that in order to identify over the top, you need to probably see some type of workout report leading into the next race to kind of see how they're working. It can be dangerous because they're obviously good horses. The Grade 1 Clark is obviously an easier race than the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. What is the motivation for running the horse back in 20 days when in his 22 start career, the quickest he's ever run back is 13. He ran back in 13 days and was awful, but that was from a maiden race into the Belmont. So I'll forgive that. I'll forgive that move of Seeking the Soul. At the 21-day mark, he came back in 21 days and won by 9 in an allowance race at Churchill, at Keeneland. So it says a lot about obviously Dallas Stewart knows what this horse needs, knows how he can excel, and there's always a possibility that he could run back to that. So it's hard. It's hard to, the Maidan, the Dubai bounce, the Breeders' Cup bounce, all of those things. I struggle to identify when they will or won't. You just got to try to treat them like individuals.
Yeah, I think that's probably wise. I feel like it's something I used to do more. I used to be against those horses more, and in recent years it seems like they've held their form more. But again, much smarter rather than having a blanket designation when it comes to that stuff to just look at the individual situations and try to come up with any patterns that you might. That's something that will become relevant again as we move on to the Saturday races at Churchill. We'll start off by looking at the Goldenrod, where we have the old school Andy Beyer angle of the double fig, the horse whose last two figures are faster than anything that anyone in the field has ever run. How short is Restless Rider going to be in the Goldenrod, JK, and does anybody have a chance to beat her?
Wow, yeah, she's going to be super short. I mean, she was
1-5 situation here, maybe.
She was a ton of people's Breeders' Cup juvenile fillies horse.
Yeah, I mean, myself included.
You have to think that she's going to be their Goldenrod horse as well.
Yeah.
Break Curfew is interesting with a fast time form figure that's going to be stretching out for the first time. I would need to do some research to see exactly, what people thought about her situation. I'll probably dig around and see if I can find out if they think that she's going to enjoy the stretch. It just feels like Restless Rider is gonna be tough in this spot. She also, one other thing that you'll note is similar with Seeking the Soul, and you can do this very easily with Timeform US, is you can see how many days between starts. Restless Rider ran 22 days between her maiden race and her stakes debut, and she won by 11. She's making the same 22-day start. She ran well enough in that spot behind Jaywalk. Jaywalk was just too good that day. So she feels like she'll be super tough. I guess the real question is break curfew. If she can find herself on the lead and maybe get brave, and it is Chad Brown, so there's always an opportunity for her to run well. But I'm not convinced that break curfew wasn't where you wanted to be at Belmont on the 24th.
Yeah, from a race design point of view, on top of everything else, I just feel like this sets up beautifully for Restless Rider to have that sort of stalking horse out there in break curfew, who may be very good, but it just seems to me that I will either be singling here or passing, which is, of course,
exactly. I was just going to say the exact same thing, but just say it a little bit differently. Like, this is the type of race that, like, if Restless Rider doesn't win, like, I don't know who's going to win. So I'm either going to single her or find another place to participate.
And you playing the Hawthorne contest with the opportunity to play in long multi-race sequences, whatever value there is to eke out of Restless Rider, I presume you might be able to get, yes?
I would think so. I mean, there's an allowance race in between that race and the Kentucky Jockey Club. So you got to see what's going to happen there. Obviously, we have a horse that will obviously be interesting in that race to see what we're going to do with him. But yeah, you can definitely find a way to still pull it out.
And it is an all 2-year-old card, which is just pretty neat. Saturday at Churchill. I definitely plan on paying attention to this. The next race we'll talk about on the show, though, is the aforementioned Kentucky Jockey Club. Goes as race 11. Once again, we have the decision of what to do with some of these horses running back from the Breeders' Cup. And let's start with a little bit more general conversation about the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. This is a race where I feel like who you come up with in here might have something to do with which horses you felt were favored by the race flow in the juvenile. And I am pretty tempted to give at least a little bit of extra credit to Nick's Go, who was on the pace in there, the only horse that was near the pace who finished in the top half of the field. I feel like the other 3 horses that were there early ended up way, way back. And I'm intrigued by Nick's Go here. Not exactly the world's most clever pick. And maybe you have to deal with the fact that the pace is going to be so fast here. but would certainly be in anything that I did. I feel like this horse has been underrated in the last 2 starts and run huge. Does the love now go too far in the other direction, or is this a horse who will be on your tickets?
No, I think he probably would be my top pick at this point. I thought he ran really well in the last race against Game Winner. I thought Signal Man ran pretty good in that race as well, coming from off of it. Big field like that was 67-1 that day. Ran well enough. Ran second to Knicks Go in Knicks Go's kind of bomb performance in the Breeders' Fraternity. So I think those two are definitely the ones that I would look at. 2 horses that are a little bit interesting to me. Obviously, Topper T is one that we talked about on the show leading into it at 52-1. And he ran.
Doesn't he want to cut back, not run long? I mean, it is Bill Mott, and Bill Mott usually I trust, but I was a little bit surprised to see him back in here.
I agree. I thought so as well. But you could also look at it as a vote of confidence. That was the first start with Bill Mott, and Bill Mott is a Hall of Famer because he can make the necessary adjustments to a horse that he felt was talented. So the way the horse was training, the fact that he got to run into him and learn something about him has trained him since then. There's an opportunity for maybe him to find whatever it was that had people buzzing about him Breeders' Cup Week. So he's definitely one I do agree that maybe it's the cutback we're looking for, but he's definitely one that I would keep an eye on. The other interesting horse is Current, which is one of my favorite horses with the blonde mane, who ran so well in the Bourbon. And didn't embarrass himself by any means in the juvenile turf. And it's interesting that Todd runs the horse back in 22 days. That's not much of a Todd thing, but this horse has been running, 26 days, 29 days, 26 days, 22 days. The horse will be fit. The horse is a graded stakes winner, obviously on the grass, and he's by Curlin. So, and he's out of a Stormcat mare. So there's plenty of opportunity for this horse to maybe have learned what he needed to learn to now perform well on the dirt. I'm not encouraged by the fact that at no point has he tried the dirt, but he's definitely one to consider at what could be a little bit of an ignored price.
It's interesting. I was going to take a negative view in that there would have been at some point an opportunity to run the horse on dirt, I would have thought. But I can see your point as well. We know in Saratoga they don't run long dirt races. Maybe it was a case of the horse wanting long, showing up in that mile turf race on September 8th. Then a case of the horse definitely wanting turf, and then from that point with the big win, going on this path towards getting to the BC juvenile turf.
I definitely don't want to ignore your first thought. I just was trying to say some other clever things away from your opinion. Knicks Go won by 5 at 70-1. Then he ran in the best 2-year-old race of the year and ran second at 40-1. The horse is good, and he has proven it. Do not allow your thoughts of him and his previous 2 performances to keep you from making an intelligent decision of including this very talented horse.
All right, let's talk about something you just said a few minutes ago. I have reluctantly accepted the idea that the word goat, that the meaning of this word has changed from what I grew up with it meaning, the guy who cost you the game, the GOAT, to the, GOAT, greatest of all time meaning. Are you telling me now that you want me to accept, JK, the idea that a bomb performance can be a good thing? A bomb is not a good thing. A bomb is a bad thing. And in other news, get off my lawn. Where did that come from? Bomb performance.
Well, I didn't mean it like, oh, that's the bomb.
I could respect that. If you'd said it was the bomb, I would have been like, okay.
I think I left a word out.
What?
Good performance at a bomb price. I bailed it 2 words
out. You were referring to his price. Okay, I didn't get that at all. That makes a lot more sense. And, yeah, when it comes to him, I mean, it's funny. I do sometimes have a knee-jerk reaction with horses who do well at prices and then come back on our bet to not to not like them. But then there's other horses for whom that just doesn't bother me at all. And for Nick's Go, it just doesn't bother me. I don't know. I can't really explain it other than to say it doesn't bother me.
I completely agree. It does not concern me either.
But you normally do have. I mean, are you like me, where you will normally defer to a last time was the time? So why doesn't it bother us with this horse? Because he's run so well at a price twice, and because he has so many other reasons to like him, including the potential flow upgrade of the last race. Is it as simple as that?
I screw up this phrase almost as much as I screw up the new name of the King's Bishop. You don't want to go to the funeral if you miss the wedding. Is that right?
Correct. You miss the wedding, why go to the funeral or something like that?
I told you I screwed it up.
Yeah, you confused me. You even got me turned around on it, and I've used that many times successfully.
So that's the problem. I think when you see a horse win at 70-1, then run, or just run good at 40-1, if you take each of those running lines individually, it makes it harder to use the horse because you feel like the last time was the time. I think this horse is actually talented, and I wouldn't do that anymore. And if you look back at his form, he had the maiden at Ellis, then he won, then they thought enough of him to send him up to Saratoga to run the 6 furlong race, and the Sanford doesn't run well. Then he runs on the Poly, so everyone's dismissing that. Well, now we know what he is. He's run two two-turn races in Grade 1 events and run first and second. He's a Grade 1 type horse, and he needs to be respected.
All right, I like it, and I'll be very curious to see how you approach these races. Let's talk about the racetrack that I'm only a few miles from, JK, back up north. Let's talk Del Mar. There's some the remnants of the old Hollywood Turf Festival, which used to be back in the day another fun way for racing fans to get their action on and over Thanksgiving. And why don't we start? I'm trying to remember, where did these races show up? Did they do one on Friday, or is everything on Saturday?
I know that I'm confused too now that you mention it. There is the Hollywood Turf Cup is on Friday, and then there's two races that are on Saturday as well. I think the Hollywood Turf Cup was the one you were thinking about.
Let's start with that one. Did you have a view?
I thought Chicago style was interesting. He got that early call of blue figures, Breeders' Cup weekend where he ran in the stake there going a mile. Now he's running longer. If you look just at time form, if you just look at the four races prior to the 278-day break, mile and a half, mile and a quarter, mile and 3/8. Now he shows up Santa Anita. He runs in the mile race, which is clearly a prep for this one, especially for connections like Tom Proctor, who don't have a lot of pressure from ownership to win, first back off a break. Let's just go out there and give him one. He ran well in that spot. He got a 1:17 time form US, and I think now going the mile and a half is going to hit that one right in between the eyes. I think Chicago's style is very, very interesting second off of a break in the Hollywood Turf Cup.
Yeah, it's a cogent case for him for sure. Saturday there's a pair of stakes, starting with the 2-year-old one, the Durante Grade 3, which will go as the 5th race. You've been waiting for any of these to run back?
The one that I kind of got my attention was the horse that ran at St. Cloud last time. The horse that Mike Pipey that got Mike Smith out of the room, which can be tough on occasion. The horse worked on the turf last time, first time in the U.S. Won her race, at St. Cloud in France. Mike Pipey is one of the cheekiest, sneakiest guys, and I think he's a really good trainer. I think that he kind of dabbles in the lower levels, so from time to time you can kind of he can have some horses not run as good as you might expect them to do, and I think it maybe could lead you into questioning how good he actually is. But I actually think he's pretty darn good. Mike will save ground down in there and could produce one good run. The other two horses that I thought were interesting were Velvet Queen and for Richie Baltas. And then also, what's it's the horse that Mandela had. I think it's Courteous. Yeah, Courteous. Both of those horses are stretching out from 6.5. Always, I think the 6.5 plays very friendly to the mile at Del Mar. So I think one of those two who found themselves forwardly placed in their last starts going down the hill could be tough in this spot. For two trainers that can get horses to stretch out, so I thought Courteous and Velvet Queen drawn to the outside could be okay, but my top pick's going to be Italia.
Going with Italia, ironically, the Spanish-bred Italia, which cracks me up.
That ran in France last time.
Yeah, she's a real international package. So one to root for the curiosity factor alone. By Pyrrhus, you ever heard of Pyrrhus?
No, I've heard of. Isn't there a group called like Primus? That's what I thought.
What do you know about Primus? That is a strange one for you to pull out, JK. Going with the old 1990s, late 80s, 90s alternative. I didn't think that was your musical genre.
No, I had a stepbrother for a while that liked to listen to a little Smashing Pumpkins, Nirvana, Primus, Pearl Jam. So I was riding around in his car all the time, the old 240 SX, until he wrecked it. And I picked up on some of that stuff along the way.
The list of bands you named was I mean, it's kind of in off the goalpost, but is almost like which one of these does not belong for Primus. But it's still it's in off the goalpost.
Look, watch this. I can give you a little 311 if you need that as well. You're impressed with that. You're impressed.
Not too bad, is it? Not too bad, this guy. Let's talk about the Seabiscuit, JK. It goes as race 7 at Del Mar on Saturday. We've got a big full field for this one. We don't have morning lines yet, but I would imagine that that Synchrony for Mike Stidham is going to be on the top of a lot of people's list. What did you come up with? Have you looked at these thoroughly? What did you come up with in here?
We know about Divisadero. We know about Rachel Alexandra, Zenyatta. I can give you some more horse crushes if you're still looking. Kinji Storm is like my underrated horse crush. I bet the horse at one point when he won sprinting back in 2000 and 14, 15. And then he started this long on the grass thing. He's been really good. He's forwardly placed. He's tactical. He's been good since he's been with Phil D'Amato. He runs well at Del Mar. Obviously, the last start going 1 3/8, he didn't run well, but he has run well in the past at Del Mar, at least just getting involved. And so he's the type of horse that I just wanted. I've always liked him. Now, you're right. Synchrony is probably the most likely winner. And it's interesting to see him finally getting some West Coast firm in his life. He's never had that before. He's always been running either at Fairgrounds, Keeneland, or on the East Coast. So I think he's probably the obvious one. But Kinji Storm is one that doesn't show up in all the big races, but he's definitely one that has a little bit of talent. Caribou Club, I've always kind of remembered Bernick expressing he thought that Caribou Club was best probably going a little bit shorter. This could be setting him up for something. Maybe he needed a race, and they'll try him here, and then they'll run him back down the hill at Santa Anita. So and Joe Talamo definitely doesn't ride all that often for Tom Proctor, drawn down inside. So I'm going to probably stay away from him here. And then Big Score's one who runs in some big races. He ran in the Shadwell Turf Mile, the Grade 1 at Keeneland on a little bit of a softer ground. So he's definitely one to keep an eye on, and he'll probably be bet a little bit. They like him on the West Coast. But for me, it's going to be Kinji Storm and or Synchrony.
All right. Couple of headlines to talk about, JK. We got a few minutes left on the show. We don't necessarily have to run out the whole hour here. I know a holiday week, we both have a lot of stuff going on, but a couple of things that I've been meaning to talk about. One is the news of this spinal injury forcing the retirement of Gary Stevens. Definitely a loss to the jockey colony out there, and just a guy who's been such a key player for me since my beginnings, really, as a serious horse racing fan, going back to Silver Charm in '97. Was just curious to hear some memories from you of Gary Stevens riding over the years, and any thoughts on this news.
It's always sad when you hear of health issues causing someone to have a shortened career, whether it's equine or human. So I always feel for someone like that. But then you also congratulate someone who has finished a career in doing something so dangerous, and to know that he can walk into his house and and pick up his daughter and hug his wife. So that's always a thing to be happy for and to be thankful for. So congratulations to Gary for his career. I'll be honest, my racing background, when I started, Gary wasn't around. I knew him from Seabiscuit, and obviously he's still done some things with Beholder, and I was reminded of his pickup mount on Run Happy in the Malibu, and when Edgar got hurt. And so he's obviously still done some things and made some noise in recent years where I have been more tuned in. But I watched back off Twitter. I watched his ride on Winning Colors. And as a guy who loves speed like I do, hats off to him for a brilliant ride of popping out there and just really sticking it to him and using your horse's speed. So congratulations to him on a great career, and I'm sure he'll find himself around the sport in years and years to come.
Yes, he has been retired before. He obviously has gone down the road of some other career paths. It'll be interesting to see which directions he chooses now, but definitely an occasion that I thought we should mark on the show. The other headline I wanted to talk about, just another piece of news that sort of slipped through the cracks for us, JK, amidst all the other stuff we've been talking about in the show. The news being that Instagrand is now starting to gear up for his 3-year-old season. You can read all about that, along with a lot of other great stuff on DRF.com. But it occurs to me that we never talked. We made a couple of cracks along the way, but we never talked about the sort of Larry Best theory that this horse would be better off long-term being put away for the season when he was choosing not to contest the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, instead being pointed for the 3-year-old career. Obviously, the jury is still out on whether or not this will be effective, but just wanted to pick your brain for a minute about what you thought about the whole concept of the horse having run so fast that time off would do him good when he'd only been seen on the racetrack so infrequently to this point.
Well, I think anytime anyone's ever asked me on this show or anywhere else what I think about the bounce theory, I think that was probably a sneak peek into how I feel about this. Look, I don't want to call anyone a liar because I don't know. But if I was gambling, I would gamble that the horse had some kind of issue. I just don't understand how you put a horse that good, who's running that well, who's that dominant, who would be odds on in a Grade 1 race that makes stallions, why you would try to get so cute that you would put him on the shelf. And maybe that's what he did. And maybe that's why he's got more money in the bank than I do, because he's got more foresight and more creativity and more of an ability to not listen to naysayers. God bless him. It just feels like the horse had some issue, but maybe not. And I don't know why you wouldn't just share it. And I'm not calling the guy a liar. That's my thought. If he wanted to give him time off, I'm very interested in seeing the experiment in a day and age where I can't see very many people doing that. I'm interested to see what happens. I hope he comes back straight and strong and participates in the 3-year-old races moving forward. And we'll see what happens when he hooks up on the West Coast with Game Winner and some of the other ones.
Straight and strong. I think you owe somebody a royalty for that one. For me, I hadn't thought it. Honestly, I'm not usually a naive type, I don't think, but I hadn't actually thought about it in the terms that you just framed the conversation. I will say this. I snickered at the previous jokes we made on the show and had the same knee-jerk reaction as a lot of people on this. But I will say that when you look and you see the amount of horses that do end up getting cooked trying to be pressed to run those 3 races in 5 weeks in the spring at 3, there's no doubt that pushing endlessly for that has a deleterious effect on horses and on crops as a whole. So I at least am open to seeing the results of the experiment of being what, sure, in a knee-jerk way seems like way too extreme in the other direction. But there is definitely a problem that this cautious approach could be the solution to. So while I am surprised by it, and I'm not saying that I would have ever chosen to go this route, should I be in the super fortunate position that Mr. Best is, I am very curious to see what happens. And it's certainly one of the first stories that we'll be following for this upcoming 3-year-old class. And it just was something that I felt like we needed to talk about at some point on the show.
And if you're going to spend that much money on horses, then maybe you are maybe it's not about creating a stallion. Maybe you do just want to run and win the Kentucky Derby. And, I think he also said, which I call there's a 2-letter thing I call. He said if he wins the Derby, he won't run him in the Preakness.
I mean, I think you'd have to take him at face value at this point based on putting away the horse that, as you pointed out, would have been odds on to win a stallion-making race as a 2-year-old. Unless you're the sort of conspiracy theory you were delving into was more responsible for that. I don't know why you'd put it past him. He clearly doesn't care what other people think.
I just threw my imaginary yellow flag. calling the 2-letter word, or the 2-letter abbreviation.
I do sometimes think that the game would be a lot better off without the emphasis on the 3 restricted races in 5 weeks in the spring. And that's holding 2 thoughts in my mind, because my first thought is the same as everybody else's on this, that it seems crazy. But trying to hold that other thought in the mind of, hey, there's other things in this game beyond the Triple Crown, and that I used to talk about the Triple Crown before I hosted a horse racing podcast. I would frequently refer to it as, in many ways, a glass ceiling for the sport, that so many terrific horses get broken trying to complete that crucible that they don't ever get to be what they would have been in a world where that wasn't emphasized the way that it is. Now, as I've gotten more involved in having a podcast and getting Triple Crown centric like everybody else, look, those races are great. They give us so much stuff to talk about. They're certainly connected to racing history in a meaningful way, and I'm no longer of the mind that it needs to be changed or this or that. It's one of the things in racing that works. But that said, I'm open to the idea that for some horses especially, you're better off having goals that aren't just related to those 3 races. I guess that's one of the reasons I feel the way I do about the Accelerate Justify debate.
No, it's fair. It makes sense. It's hard to knock the thing that brings the most eyes to the sport, but I completely understand where you're coming from. Yeah. Like it's like it's bitter. I don't want to say it's bittersweet. It's just like there's a lot of negatives that come from all of the attention and focus that are put on those 3 races. However, they do. Imagine if we didn't have those 3 races.
Right.
If it went away, there's a strong possibility that the sport goes away.
It's something that, like I said, I understand why it has the point it does, but I want to be a little open-minded anyway to the idea of somebody taking this approach to do it a little bit differently, even if it sounds crazy to everybody else. At the same time, like with the Breeders' Cup, there are things about it that I can see how you sit back and you think of things that might be a little bit better, a slightly better way to do it. But when you have these things in our game that really work, you've also got to be sensitive to that and not wanting to mess around with it too much in terms of, I'm talking about not wanting to, change the distance between races and things like that I'd previously advocated for. I've turned my mind off of those things, and I think that the series as it exists is good for racing, but I also think that people taking a little bit different approach to it might ultimately be good for racing. So I want to try to be a little more open-minded. That's all, and I think that makes sense. We've got a couple more minutes, JK. If there's anything on your wish list to talk about, anything that you've been thinking of, or we can also wrap a couple minutes early today. No rule against it.
I'm trying to think. I can't think of it. Let's see. What is going on? I don't know.
He's got nothing. We're out of things to say on this Thanksgiving weekend, not least because we've done 2 shows 2 days in a row instead of we're not hardcore out here like Steve Bick grinding for 15 hours a week. We do our 2 hours a week, and that's and that's about it. But I want to thank you, JK, for putting in the time and making this happen during a busy week. Too much good racing going on to skip today's show, which was the other option. Hopefully you gave out some winners. Hopefully you'll have some winners up at Hawthorne, and we wish you well. A closing thought, perhaps.
Happy Thanksgiving. I enjoy it. I like Thanksgiving. Look, I just usually eat mashed potatoes with gravy, corn, turkey, and bread, and people look at me like I'm funny.
That's pretty much what everybody does, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, my dad does like a really cool like macaroni, like cheese casserole that like everyone in the world loves and wants him to like bring to all types of events. But I mean, I'll eat it sometimes, but normally it's just beer, football, racing, and the food groups I mentioned above.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. I'll be for, I think, only the second time in my life eating at a restaurant for Thanksgiving. Usually I'm deep in the throes of cooking at this point, and I love cooking Thanksgiving dinner, but obviously being on the road out here, going to enjoy some of the fine hospitality from this place, and then I can sit back and obnoxiously critique the turkey. That's my way.
You'll do Thanksgiving dinner at a restaurant.
Yes, well, there's a nice house. There's a couple of different house restaurants here. I have a reservation in one, but we just got a tip. Susan had a massage earlier and got a tip from the masseuse that one of the other restaurants is actually, it's like theoretically less fancy, but supposed to do better turkey. So I'm going to now look for a little inside info from the concierge and see if I can get the straight dope on where the best turkey is, and I may move the reservations around and make sure we get the best situation. You got to be a wise guy in all things, not just at the betting windows. You got to try to take every edge this world will give you.
If you're a real man, you'd eat fish tacos for Thanksgiving.
I've had plenty of fish tacos since I'm here. Fish tacos and hoppy beer have been on the menu basically every day. I think even I, with my love of that stuff, can't quite make it happen for Thanksgiving, but it should be good. What about you? Do you have your meal all planned? You told us what you're going to eat. Have you figured out in your peripatetic lifestyle where you're going to be eating it?
No, I'm dead serious. I have no idea. I'm either going I have no clue either. Maybe Lexington tomorrow, probably not. Maybe Dallas tomorrow, maybe not. Maybe Chicago early. I don't know. It could be. Is Chick-fil-A surely not open, are they? On Thanksgiving?
For that's the one day they sub out the chicken for the turkey. I think that's. I think you'll definitely be able to do that. No problem whatsoever.
I don't know. I told you Austin's in Hawaii.
You did not tell me that. That's crazy. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, his mom threw together a little surprise trip and took him to Hawaii. So, yeah.
Well, that could be exciting for him.
Yeah, he's fired up.
That's very cool. All right, we are now officially out of time. I didn't expect to get to fill the whole show today, but we got there. And thank you very much, JK. Thank you, everyone, for listening. What a perfect day to just extend what I usually say at the end of every show and let people know how much fun it is to do this show for you, how much we enjoy your comments, how much we like being accosted in the elevator when we go to racetracks, because horse racing can be a very frustrating sport. I'll be perfectly frank. It can be a frustrating sport to be involved with sometimes. The politics, there's a lot of weird stuff, a lot of changes we'd all like to make, a lot of things we'd all like to do, that it can be very hard to get things done. And there are times where, from a professional point of view, I'll even go so far as to say I've questioned whether it's worth it to fight some of the fights. And the fact is, it is worth it, because regardless of whether horse racing deserves it, horse players do. And the thing that I like the most about this show is it's brought me and you too, JK, I think, in contact with more horse players and their perspectives than I ever had before. And I'm very grateful for that. And when I say that at the end of every show, I really mean it. Thank you, because dealing with horse players and advocating for them, that's totally worth it. And it's a fight I want to continue fighting for as long as I can. That's it. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. We will be back after Thanksgiving, probably next Tuesday. May you win all your photos.